Good day to you, the person watching my YouTube video. My name is Kathy Hestreiter, and I'm presenting on the paper I'm currently writing for my Movies and Multicultural Images class. I decided to look at the representations of Northern Arctic Eskimos and jungle people in film. For this paper, I focused on movies from the 1920s to 1930s and compared them to films from the 1990s to 2000s in order to see the changes in each culture's portrayal in film. This topic is significant because typecasting is as old as filmmaking itself, and a culture's depiction affects how the members of that culture are viewed and treated by other people. I analyzed two films from each time period, one for each multicultural group. Nanook of the North, my Eskimo film from the 20s and 30s, and Bird of Paradise from the same time had many similarities, even though the films were set in entirely different places. Eskimos were portrayed as happy-go-lucky people in a totally hostile environment, and jungle people were portrayed as happy-go-lucky but also wild and exotic in a tropical paradise. But each culture was shown as completely alien to its white viewers. During this time period, Eskimos were often used by filmmakers to show Euro-Americans how they should be. Eskimos were portrayed as resourceful to a ridiculous degree, able to survive in a world of isolation and lots of snow, and always living in igloos. Despite this, the Eskimo characters were invariably happy, with frequent smiling and opportunities for the children in the film to play. In reality, only about 5% or less of Eskimos actually lived in buildings made out of snow, and the 1800s actually saw bloody bow and arrow warfare between different Eskimo societies. Fun factoid there. In Bird of Paradise, as in many films with jungle people, the native island people were portrayed as a happy, carefree people, but also very animalistic and superstitious. We saw a little of this film in class. It was pretty memorable. The native female love interest swam naked for several minutes, and we determined that there was a definite anti-miscegenation undertone to the whole film. The native princess died in a volcano at the end, so clearly the white man wasn't meant to be with her. Throughout the film, there was a huge emphasis on tribal dancing and chanting, a disproportionately high amount considering the reality of how often it was done. The clothing, like you see here, was also created to sexualize the society even further, and is not representative of the culture. Fast forward several decades, and portrayals of Eskimos and jungle people seem to have gotten better over time. Films from the 1990s to 2000s were much more realistic and encompassed more of the culture's points of view, rather than the condescending romanticizing seen during the earlier time period that I studied. I watched Ataranhuat, or The Fast Runner, a film about Eskimos during this time period, and Whale Rider, a film about jungle people during the same time. You'll get to watch both of these films later this semester. Both movies were set in a more appropriate time period and included more of the backgrounds of each culture. Each actor lived his role rather than simply reproducing it, and because of this, both films seem to be a lot more believable and, because of that, much more engaging. The director for The Fast Runner meticulously insisted on the perfect reproduction of Eskimo life, from igloos to facial tattoos to the material of the clothing the actors wore. Additionally, there were times in the movie where houses are shown besides igloos. In real life, in addition to igloos, Eskimos also use teepees and even wooden houses with running water and everything. There are several scenes in the movie where the characters do things that I, not being from that culture, didn't understand. At one point, two of the men had a competition to win the right to marry one of the women, where they took turns hitting the other man's temple as hard as possible. And of course, there is the infamous scene where the main character runs on the ice while completely naked. The director does not use these scenes to make a statement about Eskimos or about their practices. All of the scenes are included without apology or any agenda that I could find, in order to give an accurate representation of what the life of an Eskimo is really like, and to add to the believability of the story. This film also had a plot, unlike Nanook of the North, a seemingly small thing, but it made it so much easier to watch. Jungle people were also more accurately portrayed during this time. Whale Rider was about a jungle culture, but the characters wore so-called normal clothing, that is, shirts, jeans, dresses, and so on, for the majority of the film. Tribal chanting and practice were very apparent for the duration of the film, but it was much more proportionate and enhanced the view of the culture rather than degraded it. During celebrations, the people also had traditional native clothing, but the director was very careful to keep the tribal dancing to a more appropriate and realistic proportion than directors in the 20s and 30s. Overall, film portrayal of Eskimos and jungle people seems to have radically improved between the 1920s to 30s and 1990s to 2000s. Not only did many misrepresentations vanish, but the films became more realistic and focused more on each culture's actual views and experiences. Whether this finding is similar for other multicultural groups, I couldn't say, but it would be interesting to learn. Thanks for listening. I hope you found at least one new thing you learned. I'll see you in class on the 4th.